So we're recording week number 3. We're going to start to focus in these coming weeks on specific items. And what I'll do is I'll quickly hop to the Blackboard here. And if we look at I know you guys don't see the coming weeks until we're done, but based on the CSI, we're going to focus specifically on the execution plan here, and then get into BIM authoring software, and then BIM collaboration software, before circling back specifically to the BIM uses. So as we go through this, you'll then see alignment. Once I introduce these softwares here, then you're going to get in the other classes focusing a bit more on actually getting some hands-on with the software. So it kind of actually aligns pretty well. And once we go through the planning process and the software pieces, we'll start to get into a little more of, well, how do you plan what you're going to do? But that's what today's lesson is about. You know, what do you want to do with BIM? And this is, as a BIM coordinator, this is the first thing. And really, like, the crux of this role and what we're trying to achieve is all about this BIM execution plan. So I've alluded to it. The hybrid portion this week was to just have a look at the plans, grab them, have a look, and give me some 3 differences, and we'll expand on that a bit, then going into the assignments. But it's all about this, and I think this graphic sums it up really well. This week's takeaway is this. How do you define on one specific project the lengths of which we're going to apply the BIM process? And that encompasses thinking about software, thinking about hardware, thinking about teams. We talked about the EIR last week, so the owner's requirements. What are we BIMing for ourselves? What are we BIMing for others? And as we go through the next 5 weeks, we'll be talking about a lot of strategies. Then it'll bleed into week 9, where we talk about, great, we know what we're doing, why we're doing it, are there legal or project delivery ramifications for the desires or the needs, and how do we account for those? It's a whole different discussion, and it's a valid one, but you know, often in the real world, those legal or project delivery constraints are already put in place. So for example, working on a big transit project, it's a P3, our client is the contractor, and then supervising or over the contractor is the ultimate owner. So we'll have a lot of stuff pushed to us. We'll be BIMing for our own design purposes. They'll want more, you know, scheduling or cost estimates, quantities, etc. And we'll be trying to pull and organize all of this data relative to what's going into this model. But circling back, very on the surface, owner requirements, are we capable? Make a plan, vet it, and the plan lives through the project. That's the BIM execution plan. So we're going to talk a bit about the team. Now, the team is going to help to drive how we develop these plans. So these are some internal slides we've made, so don't get caught up on vernacular, but some questions to ask, like, you know, how complicated is this project? And some of the big questions: is it a building? Is it multiple buildings? Are there utilities, road work, site work? Are there constraints put in by neighborhoods? Are we building near a highway? Are there setbacks? Are there acoustic needs? What are all of these particulars that will make up the overall project? Are we using a funky software? So do you need a BIM software champion? So for example, we all know Revit. Revit is awesome, and Revit is pull your hair out. It's all at the same time. Usually on a building project where a tool like Revit is the authoring tool, you usually want to know who those champions are, who the expert is. If there isn't one, how do you accommodate when there's the need for expert advice? Do we know what those deliverables are? Is it just the model? Is it just a CAD export? Is it just PDFs? Is it all of the above? What other applications are we interacting with? I'll always say buildings don't float. So a pure Revit project must interact with some other data for the site. Maybe it's just a 2D site plan. There's still something else that needs an interaction. How much are you going to jam into the building application? How much are you going to jam into the civil application? I was working on a bus rapid transit project, and there it was mostly civil, and they were trying to jam the building design, like the stations, into the civil software. So there's a lot of theories on how to mitigate the number of softwares being used or how to make them all work together. QA, quality assurance. How are we going to implement on the project a process to verify that the stuff going into these models are valid and accurate to produce the required deliverables? A big project. Is it a BIM project? Meaning, are we just modeling for our own singular purpose of making drawings? Or is there a greater degree of integration for full information management throughout the life cycle? And are there owners' requirements that have been defined? We need to define our tasks. Oftentimes, when a project doesn't have an execution plan, people are just jumping into the software. Oh, I got a model, pop open my Revit, boom, I start whipping things together, irrespective of requirements, constraints, other discipline needs, or the purpose of my deliverables. Sometimes people model to the great extensive minutia of detail, 3D detail that is so horribly irrelevant. And the example I use there, as an architect, I'll say to my team, I'm going to model an inside space and I'm going to model a table. So in the 2D world, I would draw the rectangle and I would label it table. That's all I needed. Table would then relate to a specification where the table's manufactured or procured, and away we go. Enter a tool like Vectorworks or Revit or ArchiCAD or EcoSim, all of a sudden they're modeling the table legs and they're modeling the shape and they're modeling the brackets, and all of these pieces are getting modeled. But at the end of the day, as an architect, it's still, that's a table, I'm going to call it a table, and it's going to have a spec. So I then challenge my team saying, why do I need to know that there's a wave or a curve in the leg of the table when it doesn't really matter, because it's going to be specified and then shop drawings and then validated and go through all of this review process. The model just has to say there's a thing that takes up space, the space is accounted for, and this thing is called table. I can schedule it, I can visualize it, et cetera, et cetera. So, task. Communication is critical. Very exciting on the systems, sorry, the tools portion of the course. You're going to be experimenting with a tool called BIMTrack. And that's an awesome tool, and it's just about the communication around clashes. So one of the things is, are we BIMing? So are you going to make clashes? That's a good question. But then once you have a clash, what do you do with it? So how do you track the communication and all the information about what gets to the reply, what gets to the solution, and you'll get to play with that on one of the tools on that class. So thinking of BIM execution, that would be one of the questions where we have the BIM execution plan. We're going to say one of the BIM goals is going to be clash detection. And then the question is going to be, awesome BIM coordinator, and what do you want us to do with clash detection? So you're going to say, well, we're going to clash architectural against mechanical. Easy enough. If there's a duct going through a window, it's going to be a clash. Then we get to say, and now we're going to have a little workflow on how to actually mitigate that and tools to help. I use the term often, office BIM lead, studio BIM lead in the UK, BIM coordinator, BIM manager. There's a vernacular that's incredible, but we have to make sure that there is that communication. BIM never happens in isolation. And it tends to fail and I hear it in IBI in certain pockets where they say, oh no, that's a BIM thing. Brent's team will take care of it. And there's, I look at the designer saying, oh, no, BIM is a process for the project, not for Brent's team. And I like that, the bottom one there. Revit, as well as the other BIM authoring tools, it doesn't have artificial intelligence. And people forget that. Well, the BIM will fix the clash. I think a lot of you identified that as as one of the myths. BIM doesn't make the fix, doesn't think, doesn't identify, or doesn't resolve, sorry. It'll identify things, but we still have to do our diligence. This came from the Handbook of Practice for BIM in Canada that was recently released. And I thought it was a really good one because understanding the team is very critical, and oftentimes, especially with firms that are new with BIM or forced into a project that requires specific BIM goals or uses, they're not familiar with how this all comes together. So you might have a project of a lot of just BIM aware staff. Yeah, I've heard of it, but I've never done anything. And then the farther up the pyramid you go, if you get a project with a lot of BIM specialists, those champions, it's a much easier project. The burden is lessened to the BIM coordinator. There's less need to handhold or be the orchestrator. Whereas if you have projects with a lot of the bottom two of the pyramid, there's just a higher burden to work to make sure it's right. And unfortunately, the pyramid or the triangle is the right shape because the top two tiers are far fewer than the bottom two. The best projects or the most optimal things we can have today are a good mix where at least there's one BIM champion or one specialist scouted across a BIM project. The other thing the handbook talked about is the burden is not all on the project teams. So as a BIM coordinator, and I challenge my BIM coordinators in IBI group is, don't press it all on the project teams if there's something that we need to think about at the corporate level. And what I like about this is they divided this off relative to project management, project production, and corporate strategic. And I actually wrote a chapter on the corporate strategic side in this manual. This is where I play a lot of my day job is helping to define the particulars around BIM so that the support networks are in place. A very simple example, and I'll use Revit again. We're going to do Revit on a project. It's not up to you, the BIM coordinator, to go and buy Revit licenses. It's up to you to identify, this is the software I need. Organization that I'm in, do we have it? Sub-consultants on my project, do you guys have it? Then are we on the right version? Can I be consistent? At the corporate level, we've got to make sure that the infrastructure is in place. So the electricity is on, so the building works, so that you guys can do your job. So stuff like software licenses, corporate directives, the need to have BIM coordinators, defined processes, so you're not reinventing the wheel every single time you decide we're going to do clash detection, or we're going to link our model to our specifications. We're not going to link to our master specs every single time we do a project. You should be handed from your corporate strategic teams the abilities to do these certain things. Not all firms will have things in place. I've been doing a lot of effort to try to put stuff in place, yet there's a lot of things still to be done just in the firm that I work with. Then at the project level, you manage things, and we need to make the execution plan is project specific. Yet, this lesson plus the assignment, we're going to expose those templates. So there are industry templates so that you're not writing an execution plan from scratch every time. When I was on the Olympics 12, 13 years ago, I was writing stuff from scratch. I would have killed to have an execution plan template. So I think the rest is self-explanatory. You can see as you progress from strategic to management to production, you're going down into the project itself, and you see the things that are project specific, and you see the things that should be at the higher level. Similar to show that there is a role definition in some jurisdictions like the UK actually specify and mandate BIM management type roles. Now they call them information and interface managers. This is defined by the UK government. Again, semantics, it doesn't matter. Their definition is an information manager ensures that the data is correct, The interface manager works on the integration of the models and the teams. Could be one person, could be two people, depending on the number of or the extent or the size of the project. But I just like this concept because it's a government mandated requirement. You can't bid on government work if you haven't identified who is going to be managing BIM on the project. Again, side reading, maybe at the end of this course, you have a chance to download BS 1192 and these PAS documents. Download them, read them. They are awesome reads just to further enhance the stuff we're talking about. I've mentioned semantics relative to the name of this role. So I rationalize it as generic as I can. The BIM leader for your project BIM lead. In the industry, when I'm interacting with other firms, other countries, these are all the names I've had that really results to who's the person that's accountable for the BIM stuff. And that's it. And I use that, you know, and sometimes I think it's silly when I say it like that, but I use that internally in IBI group all the time. Don't care what you want to call it. Who's the accountable person? And that's the person that project management or strategic management can work with to ensure the project is getting everything it needs. And you see, it's hilarious when you look at how many different roles there are, and I've carried a lot of these roles on projects. The other thing is that BIM does not work in isolation. So when we're developing BIM execution plans, and I remind this of my BIM coordinators continually, stuff like file naming, document controls, project schedules, often like the generic BIM execution plans, you'll see that they have spots for a lot of items. But I just remind people, just because the BIM plan, the template says, what's your project schedule? We're the BIM coordinators. We're not going to invent a project schedule. You must coordinate with the project manager. They're the ones that are going to drive. So depending on the size of your project, whether it's a public-private partnership, P3, whether it's just a traditional design project, you may or may not have all of these roles. So a quality manager, for example, usually you don't have a designated person on smaller projects. So what does that mean? That means in the BIM execution plan, there's the section for quality assurance. And we're going to just talk about how strategic methodologies on how to ensure the modeled information is of the correct quality. When there is a quality manager, we're usually working together, and our quality assurance for BIM feeds into overall project-wide quality assurance. I don't know, if you have any questions, just feel free to jump in. Let me just make sure you're all the new ones that came on, that you can unmute yourself. Give me 1 second here. Okay. Yeah, and I don't, again, your project experience, you may or may not have seen these roles. I've been on massive projects where all of these are at play, and small ones. The interesting one, just quickly here, is the document controls manager. Oftentimes, doc controls and BIM, we collide and we converge and we interfere with each other because it all gets mixed up. And that goes back to last week or the first week I talked about WIP shared and published. So on the WIP side of things, sorry about my Skype, on the WIP side of things, we're developing models, we're developing drawings, we're pushing information to be shared and published. But when we share and publish, these doc controls come in and say, okay, we're going to grab your drawings, your model output, your data, whatever the defined deliverables are in the BIM execution plan, we're going to feed them into a doc control system and track who we send them to, track the comments, feed comments back to the BIM team in order to reincorporate in the models, and go through the cycle over and over and over again. Happens on major projects. On smaller projects, often not. So just keep that in mind. All projects need a point of accountability. The way I like to define it is that there will be simple 2D projects, and that's obviously not the scope of this overall course, but oftentimes you'll be hired as a BIM coordinator, and then you'll be asked, well, can you just take this little mini 2D project? Then there's the simple BIM, where we're BIMing kind of just for us, get these models, the uses, design, authoring, reviews, and visualizations. And then there's these complex ones that involve all those other potential BIM uses that would span from design through construction into operations. And those we'll expand much more on in a couple of weeks. Just thinking a bit of responsibility here, the role of the BIM coordinator, it's very important to understand that you're not the architect, you're not the engineer, you're not the project manager. All of these disciplines intertwine together, coupled around the model. And I'm including civil specifically, and I'm including that image specifically because it has road and building all connecting. Every one of these disciplines will have a lead and designers. Hopefully the term drafter isn't used anymore, but whatever. You might have multiple, so in MEP, you might have mechanical engineer, electrical, plumbing, fire suppression, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Could go on forever. It's all good. Wrapping around all of these people is your project manager or your design manager, or project manager and assistant project manager. I've been on projects where there's an overall project manager, there's area managers or segment managers, and then underneath them, there's assistant. It's incredible the amount of management we could have depending on the size of the project. But focusing on that central data, there is this role that we're talking about today, the BIM lead with their execution plan. For me, the most important role, others on the project, others in this realm here may disagree, doesn't matter. There's a vehement importance that's required here to document and define what we're doing and why we're doing it relative to that thing in the middle that we call the model that has a direct influence on every other entity or person or role that's associated to any one project. So strong, so powerful, so important. So let's just remember that. The role, in a nutshell, will span these disciplines. So there's elements of BIM within all these disciplines. And I like to describe the BIM lead as an orchestrator or a puppet master, whatever analogy works for you. But you're orchestrating the development of modeled components, and then you're orchestrating the uses of all the information as they come together. So scoping the requirements, planning, coordinating the team, championing the training, coaching, being that point of accountability, and you're really like a discipline lead in itself. Usually you'll have a budget, you'll have some accountability, etc. Now, in the BIM execution plan, we also talk about defining what we're doing and why, and also defining the breadth of who owns all of those specific components. And that's the trick there. And we'll talk about that when we get to the execution plan itself. But just imagine, look again, always look around the space you're in. I'm looking around my room, I see walls and chairs and ceiling and lights. So just from there alone, the walls will have a joint ownership between architectural and structural. The ceiling, again, architectural and structural, but the finishes would all be architectural. The lights would be electrical. The furniture would be interiors. So just from those elements, I identified 5 different design disciplines, and they all converge together in this model. Now, all of those elements are going to have data, and depending on what I'm doing with that data, the BIM lead is going to orchestrate how all of that comes together. And we'll leave it at that and go on. But just imagine all of the different disciplines in the rooms you're sitting, and you're probably in similar rooms to what I'm in. And that's the orchestration of how they come together. Now, the BIM execution plan. This is your document. This is your gospel. This is how you guide the rest of the team in order to meet and apply what we're doing and why. So The plan itself, we have templates. And what I've done is I've exposed you to the various templates, and I'm going to show them to you afterwards. And the next assignment looks at these two templates and asking for an in-depth comparison. I'm picking on North America and the UK because they're the most prescribed and defined templates that we have. All very similar, stating the goals and what uses will be harnessed to achieve the goals. For me, that's, I think, the most important part of the execution plan. The BIM goals are, why are you BIMing? I am BIMing to create my drawings and be efficient. It's a pretty easy goal. I am BIMing to generate quantities to feed a cost estimating system for our cost estimator, period. And just imagine, those could be goals, right? BIMing to create, to visualize schedule simulation, as well as to deliver renderings and to feed into a VR system. So a couple of different uses to feed that goal. The uses would be 4D schedule simulation, visualization, design review, etc. So the BIM uses are what you do with the model. The BIM goals are a collection of uses to achieve an overall goal. And I'll show you examples in a bit. Then again, I always say if you're going to be exposed to just a 2D CAD project, well, it'll just be CAD, and it's not very exciting, but you could be using elements of data management to meet your CAD. The other thing is, we're going to talk a bit about project delivery later on in the course. But just remember, in the confines of the BIM execution plan, there's always elements of scope, schedule, budget, quality, risk. I'll keep saying that, or I'll allude to those for the rest of the semester, really, or the term. So that BIM cannot happen in isolation. And when we talk about project delivery, this is the project delivery triangle from the Project Management Institute, and I love it because they have a very simple thing. It's a triangle, you destroy one of the vertices, the triangle collapses. Therefore, I can't do more BIM that increases my scope. So instead of just modeling for the sake of creating drawings, I'm going to model and do higher detailed modeling. I'm going to put more information in, but I don't have enough time to do it, and I'm going to burn my schedule or my budget. Well, you've destroyed project delivery. I may want to increase the quality of our work, but if you do too much quality without enough scope, schedule, budget, you explode the triangle. And if you diminish the quality, you implode the triangle. So those kind of all work together. We can't plan a project void of an understanding of your project delivery. Hence the point in the execution plan, it says, what's your schedule? Who's your project manager? You have to ask those questions. So if the project manager says we have to make a model in a week, it's going to greatly define to what depth we can do BIM, because a week deliverable, there's not much we can actually do. Back to the EIR. We're going to do BIM. Are there any imposed requirements on us? Is the client expecting anything? Very critical. Sometimes it comes down to this first item. Not knowing what software platform is required for the digital turnover can have detrimental ramifications to any one project. I think that's a huge takeaway. Oftentimes, you hear it's a building, you jump into Revit. It's a roadway, you jump into Civil 3D. That may end up proving to be right, but not validating that could be catastrophic. Same with coordinates, especially if you're on a rail project or a road project, or there's a facility that interacts with buried piping. All of these types of things, as a BIM coordinator, you won't have the answer, but you just need to bring the awareness to the team that there's a lot of things that are going to come together. We can't jump and make a solution without knowing that we're on the right path. These EIRs are very critical. The other one I'll talk a bit right here, timing of data drops. So again, data drop is a UK term, and I love it. It's just turning over of information. Sometimes, or often here in North America, what that equates to is a PDF set of my 30% drawings. Very low risk, You just batch print your views, your sheets, whatever term, depending on what software you're using, here you go. From a BIM coordinator's perspective, you smile and you move on and continue. But there's a lot of projects now that say, well, no, I want X digital format and all these various items at every single stage of the project. Because the clients are getting smarter, saying, we don't want to wait till the project is finished to find out the data you're giving us is not going to be good. So they're asking for it at 30, 60, 90, 100, start of construction, at periods during construction, then at turnover at operation. That's a lot of data drops, a lot of digital turnover, all funneling through the BIM lead. So you can imagine they're scoping the role. PDFs versus full data turnovers at every stage. That's a very different scope. These capability assessments, so remember that first graphic I showed, the EIR, and then you assess ourselves. This is figuring out, can we do what we said we're going to do? And this came out of the UK, and in North America, we don't have anything formal, yet we are forced to ask the same questions. So we do ask the questions, we just don't have the forms. So what I've done and what I've included in the literature for you guys to compare is, you know, what comes out of the UK, what comes out of our industry standard in North America. And, you know, part of your assignment, here's a big difference is right here. We don't have these. So where do these come into play in the North American one? What the CPIC has done in the UK is said, assess our competency relative to BIM. I apologize for the spelling mistake there. As a project team, are we all saying the same thing when we say BIM? Are we inferring the same understanding? When we say clash detection, do we have the proper workflows, proper capabilities? If I say, let's do a 4D schedule simulation, do you guys even know what that is as a sub-consultant or as a part of the project team? So it asks all those questions from an overall BIM perspective. The IT forum looks at, does the supply chain, so that's everyone on your design team or everyone on the construction team or the design and construction team if it's a design build project, are we able to exchange information, connect our systems, same software platforms? Quite simply, can we work together? Right? Do we all, and I guess this one solution would be, well, we're going to grab everybody and put us all under a project office. And I've seen this happen, a PMO, project management office. Great concept. Everyone's together. Everyone's on the same type of computer, same network, same software, same everything, all provided by the project. The feasibility of it is quite low because the projects are getting bigger and faster, and more times it's, well, you know what? Let's get you 5 entities, 5 firms to work together. Each of these firms, you're going to use 5, 10 of your offices scattered across the globe, working around multiple time zones. A lot of advantages for the projects. Great. A lot of challenges for the BIM lead. How do you do that? How do you coordinate these people? Awesome challenge, a challenge. And then that leads to the resource assessment form. We said we're going to model everything in Revit plus Civil 3D. Well, do we have the people? Can we do it? Are they trained? All those questions come up. So those assessment forms are very, very important. And on the North American side, where we've struggled with BIM execution planning, is we forgot to ask those questions sometimes. So we jump into these awesome plans, engage some amazing firms, and we can't share. Or we misinterpreted what BIM means, and then we struggle. So a typical structure for the execution plan, and these are one of the links I've asked you guys to go to, but we'll talk about that after. So Penn State in North America, they're the ones that have created the BIM execution plan template. So it's their computer integrated construction research program. I think it was, goodness, I want to say 6-7 years ago, maybe a little longer. And they've given us a very typical layout, and it talks a lot about what we just said. Now, notice section B and C. I'll always say to my BIM coordinators, that's not us. That's us finding the information. We don't define the project particulars. We don't just define the discipline leads, the content. That's us working with all those other stakeholders. So BIM doesn't happen in isolation. We don't procure the project. We're not there negotiating with our clients. The project manager's doing that. Hopefully, and this is where, as time progresses, the BIM lead is more and more engaged. So, what I've said to our project managers, you're often signing a contract. Somewhere in a contract, it talks about a deliverable, something BIM, something CAD, something is mentioned, and you guys are signing on the line. Please engage us BIM people so that we can actually help to define and make sure that we're not committing to something that will result in a sheer and utter failure. And then that gets down, once we've done that, we can go through this BIM execution plan, information exchange. What are we giving? Delivery strategy. What are we contracted to give? How are we doing it, etc. So a lot of these sections, as a BIM coordinator, we've got to make our solutions and answer all of these questions. So we'll circle back. In the UK, very similar. So again, CPI, the Construction Project Information Committee, made their BIM execution plan. Their plan is governed to meet the needs of the British standard. But what I love about this plan, they called the pre-contract and the post-contract. So they're specifically saying this plan is going to live and enhance, but in order to pull a team together, you need an initial plan, pre-contract. What are you doing? Why are you doing it? Software, ideas, main milestones, main modes of collaborating, and your deliverables. So some basic fundamentals that you then bring to the teams, and then you enhance. Are we capable? Can we do it? Fill out our assessment forms. Better workflows, or what are the workflows? And then you start to enhance the plan once the team is made. So they called it pre-contract, post-contract. Initially, when I was exposed to this, I said, why don't we have that in North America? We kind of do. We just say, here's the first draft of the plan, and then what I call the living plan, but usually there's a second or third or fourth draft. The first draft of an execution plan usually has a lot less information, but it lays the foundation. And when we get to the end of this course, the presentation, so there will be presentations. So those who are having microphone problems, those last two classes, you'll have to be able to phone in or something. The presentations will be based on the criteria. Here's the initial plan. Now, based on the enhanced criteria, here's an augmented or refined plan. And we'll talk through that process and the outcomes. These are the two plans from the UK perspective. And you can see, very similar to the Penn State, information, the uses, planning them, setting the standards. And then when you get to the post-contract, there's a little more information as it expands on what you're doing. Notice the appendices as well. So we do have, I've provided those for you. The appendices get into particulars. For example, level of detail or level of development matrices here in North America. And we'll talk about those in a second. Back to Penn State, what it defined, this is its description of a BIM use. So it says, this is what it could do, and understand a use of the model so you can then build it or mold it to achieve a goal. So the struggle, and it's often hard to explain a BIM use until you get into the BIM plan and you see how they define it. But a use, existing conditions modeling, very broad, very, you're going to go out there and you're going to BIM what you see. That's the gist of existing conditions modeling. But for what purpose? What goal is it going to achieve? And the goal is defined at the project level. So I want to be able to, so here's one from my current day job. We're trying to provide asset management services for a corporate interior landowner so that they could track and modify, so they could track the use of their existing office assets, and then those that are going to be designed in an office renovation. So that's a goal. That's a pretty crazy goal, but that's going to involve the use of existing conditions modeling. We're going to go in there, scan what's there existing, and create a model of it. We're going to have a model of the new addition, so design authoring. We're most likely going to pull it all together to visualize. So now I have existing conditions, design authoring, and the visualization use. And then we're going to have an asset management strategy, so the asset management use. 4 uses will pretty much get me to that insane goal I described. Maybe a couple other uses as well. But that's the idea. So you look at all the capabilities you can do once you have this awesome model, and you try to fit it inside what we're trying to achieve. When we get into the BIM execution plans, you'll see, and this is looking at the Penn State again, it talks about the purposes of these uses. So does a BIM use help you to gather information, help you to generate information, analyze, communicate, or realize? Realize being building. And you can see the difference here as you flow through. This is really in your pre-design, design phase. We're designing something, we're enhancing during design, we're visualizing, transforming, drawing, or are we constructing and operating? And that was why in the hybrid portion of week 2, I was saying, do that matrix. Look at the BIM use and see where it falls. Because oftentimes, depending on the nature of the project, defining that BIM execution plan will be dependent on understanding, what are we designing? What are we building? Who's involved? Therefore, who's going to benefit from the use? Sometimes it's as simple as the design team. But when you get into the analyze, there are certain analytical BIM uses that will say, well, great, we can do structural analysis, energy analysis, lighting analysis. They may only affect the specific engineering discipline. There may be a benefit maybe to the engineering discipline plus the owner operator. So there's a bit of balance there. But again, I don't want to freak you out with, oh my God, how are we going to do this? Oftentimes BIM execution plans get easy, sometimes get complex. The other thing here in North America is this LOD, level of development. And we'll talk a lot about this in the legal side, because this here has become a bit of a burden and a bit of a blessing as well. So basically what it's saying is, to what extent am I going to model? And I'll go right back to the table. In 2D, I'd make the rectangle, call it table. In 3D, I would model the table, but to what depth? And then why? And as long as it's, LOD 300 is the designer's friend. This is what we do. The element is graphically represented in the model as a specific system, object, or assembly in terms of quantity, size, shape, etc. So think of the table. You model it in Revit, it's a table, it has its a specific size, and you're good. A ductwork. I'm modeling the duct. I know it's the supply duct, and I know its size. As I'm doing the turns and the bending radiuses, it does the elbows, the access points, etc. Because it has size, quantity, shape, etc., it allows us to do the clash detection against all of the other elements that have quantity, size, and shape, like beams and columns and walls and floors, and we have this happy thing working together. The non-graphic may be attached, and that's a beautiful thing. It may be. So if there is a purpose for me to have my door and say, you know what, it's a fire-rated door, that's non-graphical. Fire rating, maybe the hardware that I might associate to it, the type of glass, the type of finish, all non-graphical information that I, as an architect, could use for my door schedule. But it doesn't have to be there. The door is still the door. It takes up the same geometry. As you get further down, we're starting to get more and more particulars about how it's constructed, how it's assembled, assembly in terms of size, shape, etc., detailing, fabrication, installation information. We're getting into the realm of construction. So there's the difference there. The interfaces with other buildings at this 350 level. So once it's procured and starting to be assembled, we're getting into the world of design and construction. So from a BIM coordinator's perspective, the message we give to our managers, anything above 350 in the design world, red flag, stop and talk about it. Scope, schedule, budget. What are we doing? Why are we doing it? Why are we, the architect and engineer, modeling MAR? In the construction world, well, we're in the world of LOD 400. How do we get to there, pulling in information from design that will be of a lesser LOD? Great dialogue, great tension, never-ending tensions. So I've provided you an LOD matrix as well, so you can see the North American version, and then down here there's a UK equivalent called the Master Information Delivery Plan. I've provided both as well. So this assignment to compare and contrast, get an idea. But the gist of the LOD matrix is list the items. Major item, is it a footing, a foundation, a wall? We're trying to focus on major items, not the minutia in the model. So once you have the major item, who's responsible? Who's the model element owner, the MEA? Is it architecture, arc and struct? Is it MEP? Who is it? Then what's the LOD at the specific phase? 30, 60, 90, 100 is usually what we work with. And I've always say that we're at 100% design. If that LOD is above 300, there's going to be a big problem because you cannot have construction-based information in a model being produced for design. It's not possible. We don't know it yet. Where it gets convoluted in design build projects. I'm designing a building, contractors already starting to build it. That gets so messy, it's beautiful and it's fun. Example, I'm working on my structure, contractor has already poured the concrete underneath. What am I supposed to do with my model? Do I add pour joints? Do I add rebar detailing? I will always say no, they might say yes. Great tension. What I'll have to do is make it geometrically correct. Go back over here. In terms of quantity, size, shape, location. So if a concrete wall is poured while I'm still designing the building and the concrete wall shifts half a meter because they had to, because of a mistake, whatever it is, well, now the concrete's there. I must update my model to reflect. So there's a little back and forth. That then gets into change mitigation. Is it an expected change? Is it an error? Do I need to ask for more scope and schedule? Do I get more budget? What, all that stuff comes into play. But at the end of the day, the wall moved, my model's going to have to move. We're going to have to update and redesign and adjust accordingly. On the civil end, the world is not just about buildings. We worked on this a couple of years ago. We said, okay, well, what do these LODs mean in the civil world? And we provided some examples. I'm not going to dwell on them, but simple things like a curb, right? Look at your sidewalk curbs. Oftentimes they're represented in a single line. We said, well, let's jump into the world of 2D. We know the length, width, and height. The curb's going to give us volume, and you get the benefits of having volume of concrete along the linear road. There's benefits to that curb, sidewalk, etc. Then the biggest one for us is when we get into the buried pipe work, buried systems here. All of these pipe alignments, you get length of pipe joints where you might have valves, breaks, etc. And then the interferences, the geometrical exactness of where these items are in the vertical space buried underground to avoid clashes, enhance design. And if you could get the existing models to avoid clashes with existing, so powerful. So powerful. And later on, I can't remember which week later, I'll show some examples of where we actually applied this, and it was a thing of beauty. if you think about BIM in the building world, BIM in the underground world is just phenomenal stuff. Defining your BIM goals in the project. So just circling back to this here, this is a project I've worked on. So if you look at the BIM execution plan, you listen to me talk, you might think, oh my goodness, what are you talking about? This is insane. So here's your practical. Here is 3 simple goals. 2 high priority, 1 medium. The goal is what we're going to do. And then the potential BIM uses are how I'm going to use the model to achieve the goal. That's it. Once I do that, I get the buy-in from the project manager, from the discipline leads. This is my BIM gospel. This is what I'm doing as a BIM lead to make this happen. Okay? It also protects us from a liability perspective. So this was on a major project, and 3D model with enough detail, roughly what would be on a 1 to 20 drawing to support the design engineering's required deliverables. That's what that BIM goal was. That then tied into legal, saying we're not going to do a higher LOD. We're not going to go and BIM. A good example of, if you think of wall details, you know, I'm going to BIM my wall assembly. So I might have brick, I might have block, I might have insulation. So 100 brick and airspace, insulation and block. That's your typical architectural, you know, we would assemble that. Might be 300 millimeters wide, maybe 350, and you do your outside wall. Very simple. You set that wall type up in Revit or EcoSim, and away you go. Done. I can get quantities. I can actually get area or volume of brick, block, or insulation. I'm not going to go back and model my vapor barrier, model my top flashing, my drip flashing, my damp proofing. A contractor would love that. Well, we're not going to do that. I can't even fathom modeling a film of plastic or something like that. It could be done, it would be crazy. So this kind of mitigates that. Another example, a project with 5 BIM goals. This was more civil focused. But again, oftentimes you'll get this, creating a coordinated 3D model. I think I have that in every single one for the deliverables with the detail to produce for multiple disciplines with enough detail to produce deliverables. Very simple, common BIM goal. Then you'll see a couple others here. Visualization for the communication purpose. And we actually did that. This one actually had cost estimation in place. So we actually said we're going to use advanced automation to feed our cost estimate. And we built a workflow around the quantity takeoffs of the pipe networks from Civil 3D, what would come out and what would be fed to where. And then it went off to the cost estimator. So we made the promise here to do it. Therefore, there was the expectation that the costing data, or the quantity data, sorry, would come out of the model. One more example, and you can see different formats as well, depending on how you format your plan. Very similar. Just want to see if there's anything specific here. Increase field productivity. And that's an interesting one because that's focusing on post-design into construction. You can see the uses that were used to that. Similar uses to what we would use to make our model, only here we were probably connecting maybe into the accessing the model via the iPads or via mobile devices and making sure we had a cloud-based repository to access the data, etc. So, you know, depending on the nature of the project, that could lead to some interesting solutions. But those are your BIM goals. Then the BIM uses. The North American and the UK will have very similar, these BIM use tables. What we do as BIM coordinators is usually we just mark off, these are the uses we're going to use, and in which phase. And that's a critical thing too. So if you're a BIM coordinator on a project for an entity who's only involved during design, that's our realm of influence, only during design. If you're working for a major entity, a contractor, or a major project with multiple entities, you might be scattering across planning, design, constructing, and operating. So it depends. And notice, what's a good one? 3D coordination, design and construction, it applies to both. So this is kind of, without exposing to this is why I asked you guys to start to think about that in with the BIM uses. Imagine where they apply. And I think we'll touch more on this in week 6 or 7 as well. This is a convoluted slide, so I apologize for that. The only reason I wanted to show it is, don't get bogged down in the real world about how to phase projects. So I talk about, the easiest are your percentages, 30, 60, 90, 100. It's the most common thing scattered across the globe. The other thing is I highlighted REBA. So there are 3 that are highlighted, the REBA as well as the AIA. So if you're in North America, most entities, most firms will know project definition, schematic design, design development, contract document prep. Those are common, really pushed by the American Institute of Architects, but well adopted into most project delivery methods. For those who don't know it, this maps it back to your 30, 60, 90. Same in the UK. Last time I went through that pump that grew throughout the phases. Those are your 7 phases in the UK. REBA 1 to 7. End of the day, it still applies to 30, 60, 90, 100, construct, operate. That's what we do. That's the flow of information. And just be mindful of that, because oftentimes BIM coordinators, there's just a hell of a lot of confusion around this. And especially if you're working for oil and gas industry, and this one threw me for a loop. I'd be, Brent, we're doing feed. Okay, well, first of all, what does that mean? And then when I discovered what that meant, it was, well, where does that map? Because front-end engineering, I used to think was just your project definition, up to 0, maybe 5, 10%. No, that actually encompassed the whole 30% design, straight through design development. So if you're working in the oil and gas industry, the feed phase is everything from 0 to 30. There's a lot of work that's done in feed. So again, I think most of your backgrounds were not from there, but who knows where you'll end up after this course. They do a lot of BIMing in oil and gas, a lot of pipe networks. The architecture isn't as glamorous, but the data is phenomenal in that realm. So that's something to keep in mind. Then we talked, data turnover requirements. So, when we're making the plans, we get down to the information turnover. That's a huge question. And again, you'll be happy when it's just a PDF. But those days are numbered where PDFs ever do the trick anymore. And I don't think I've been on a project with just PDFs as a turnover. Oftentimes it's PDFs and CAD, right? And that is the most common. So CAD being DWG or DGN. And I've had some strange projects where it's actually both, and that makes me scratch my head, but whatever, you deliver what you have to. So that means in the BIM world, if you're in tools like Revit or ArchiCAD or SmartPlant 3D, where it's actually CAD neutral, you need to have that workflow to say, okay, we're modeling, I'm going to need to export all my sheets from my BIM tool to one of these CAD tools. And then you get into complexities where, Revit to AutoCAD, even though they're all Autodesk, it's not always as easy as it should be. EcoSim to MicroStation, a lot easier. It's Bentley to Bentley. SmartPlant 3D to MicroStation, not bad. SmartPlant 3D to AutoCAD, horrible. So depending on what you're doing, you could have some challenges. The other thing is if you're turning over data, and data is, that's what we're all about. So the UK uses COBE, which COBE stands for Construction Operation Building Information Exchange. I think I said that correctly. And it focuses really in the building world. It's just a big monster spreadsheet. That's all it is. And what it does, it's pretty clever. So in a building app, so it would be Revit or EcoSim or one of those, it looks at your defined spaces, and then it looks at all the data of the assets around or within the space. So the walls, the floors, the components placed within, and it scatters it throughout a spreadsheet organized based on the UK defined file name, the space, and all the stuff inside. Very simple, explain simple, definitely not simple, but you know, it's there. What you would have to do as a BIM coordinator is say, all right, I know we're feeding into COBie. I know you guys are using this tool. I'm now orchestrating the exchange. So Revit users export through to COBie. Now I have this spreadsheet. Here you go, clients. And then you get the feedback from the client. This is great. Or you get the feedback from the client. This is horrible. And then the BIM coordinator gets to have fun. Why is it horrible? How do you fix it? How do you influence the fix, et cetera, et cetera? Then on the North American side, we've got these wonderful process maps. So part of the compare, I'm going to want you guys to have a look at these. This is crazy, so I'm not going to dwell on this. But what the process map does is it says, let's just go through the BIM process one by one from start to finish. So if you're familiar with just the concept of a process map, I'll just quickly here. You validate your program. So that's not your program as in Revit versus EcoSim, the project program. What are you BIMing? Why are you BIMing it? You author your schematic design. Architects, engineers, make your models, right? Then what are your BIM uses? Are we going to do cost estimating, 3D coordination, you know, your virtual reality, 4D schedule simulation, analysis? Now, that's not to say you're doing all of those, but what are you doing? There would be a process for that. And then you would just go back and forth, hey, it didn't work, down, or it did work. And then you have your info exchange. Here's our schematic design. Here's all the outputs from the process. So here is our schematic cost estimate, our 4D model, our engineering analysis model, whether it's lighting or structural, et cetera. That's it. And then it goes back and forth over and over again until you're done schematic design. Now you go to the next phase, your design development, same concept, whatever your BIM use is, you go through that iterative process. You have your deliverable, your design development deliverable, and your output deliverables from your BIM uses. Next phase, same concept, etc. That's all this is, this process map. So what they're saying is the Penn State gives you these templates, and it says, when you make your execution plans, think about not only what BIM use you're doing to meet your goals, but now what's the processes to achieve these? Later on, I think week 9, 10, or maybe week 11, I'm going to ask you guys to make a process map. So we're going to get there. We're going to walk through these. But that's the gist of the map, is there's an overall one, what they call level 1 process map, that maps through all of this. Then their level, the next level, oh, sorry, I actually zoomed in on these to make it easier on your eyes. I apologize. So that was just good. That would go through it. So, you know, level 1 is looking at the specifics of your phase, the uses, and your outputs. Level 2 is looking at a specific use. So this is design authoring. And what it says is, great, you've said you're going to author content. How are you going to do that? So what this is saying is, in order to build my model, I need information. I need the program. I need to know what am I modeling? Is it a building? Is it a road, etc.? I need to identify what I need to model, identify content I need. Content is huge. Am I going to be sitting here at my project building chairs? Or do I know where to get some chairs? Same with everything else, building curtain walls and wall types and road, road sandwiches, so asphalt, gravel, etc. Am I going to build all this stuff, or do I have it somewhere? Then we're going to create the model. We're going to assess the model. Does it meet our requirements? Then we're going to deliver. Next phase, continue creating, validate, deliver, create, validate, deliver. Yay, we're done. We design authored. That's what a process map is. At IBI, we've catered them and we've adjusted them to suit. But this, just understand that these exist and definitely have a look at them because they all come into play. This is for design review. So the first one was authoring. This is for review. Same process. So in order to do design review, I first need my design model. So this design authoring is the crux of everything. If we don't have a model, we can't really do anything else. So I bring in my model. Now what am I going to do with it? Am I creating what's called a virtual mockup? So a Navisworks model, right? Are we doing that? Are we just pulling info to review for operations and maintenance? Am I going to be walking my owner operator through the design? Maybe that's all we're doing. Am I compiling for constructability review? Or other, more and add other reasons to have a review. We conducted the review. We have our output, which is the information. So there's going to be some output from this. The biggest output is the design acceptable? If not, go back and start all over again. Return to design authoring, or you finish the process. That's your process map. And I'm not going to, just for the sake of time, I'm not going to walk through all of these, but the coordination process, it's there. And as you look through these processes, as a BIM coordinator, that then helps to drive, well, what software might I need? Or how do you augment these processes to suit my specific? 4D schedule simulation. As a BIM coordinator, do I need this during design? Do I need this in my execution plan? If the answer is no, you remove it. If there's a purpose for it, you keep it. And I've had some design projects where we've actually done this, and it's really improving. So I as an architect would never 4D schedule simulate how it's going to be constructed. That's means and methods. That's a contractor. If I try to do that as an architect, there's liability issues. It's not good. But I may want to prove to a client, hey, I've made this really congested, tight space. This is how it could work. This is how people could move through it. Or this is the life safety situation. Or this is how, from a very macro level, they would put the floor and then the component and then the wall, and this is how it could come together conceptually, not means and methods. So it could be design, most likely construction. Cost estimation as well. So I'll just cycle through these. Record modeling, actually, this is a good one. So this one I'm actually going to stop on for a moment. This is one that has ramification for both designer and contractor. So when we start the process, step one, identify requirements. So the owner has to identify that. What do you want, Mr. Owner, as a deliverable? And oftentimes you'll hear, I don't know, we just want everything. So then it's up to us to figure out. Sometimes they want a model for asset management purposes. Sometimes they want a model for operational simulation in treatment plants or for building evacuation. We then have inputs. And look at these inputs. There's a design model, a construction model, and then Penn State calls it a 4D model. So it's a scheduling model. Remember last time I said you could have clashes based on different temporal points. So during the schedule simulation, I could have a clash only at, during week 5 and 15 of construction because I'm going to build a big berm to have a bulldozer at a higher level. So there's different temporal clashes too. So there are these 3 types of models. Now, me as an architect, I want to have a record model of my design model. So that is, you moved my door, I moved my door. You moved my wall, the wall was moved during construction, I'll move my wall. I don't want to know the pores. I, as an architect, don't want to add pour joints and rebar detailing and joint details from columns to beams and stuff like that. That's going to be in the construction models, which include fabrication information or delivery information, stuff like that. So there's this convolution of a lot of data. And part of that is siphoning how that comes together. making sure that's scoped and scheduled and properly accommodated in this workflow. Operations is a huge BIM use, yet it doesn't happen all the time. This is where your owner is on board and understands that there's more to BIM than just building my model. This building lives forever. This building will be dynamic. The data will live and move forward, and I want it to be all accounted for. That's a beautiful BIM world. Gets accounted for. So those were the BIM, the process maps from Penn State. These are a couple that I've made in my career where the project didn't have that much of a delineation or had some different particulars. So I just wanted to show you that, you know, even with these process maps, I tell BIM coordinators, there's no right and wrong as long as you're conveying what's happening. So this one here, I was trying to show there'll be an overall collaboration environment. We're going to have some existing information from the external entities. We're going to make some stuff. We're going to build models. We're going to have an interaction of data, coordination models, visualizations, and quantities. This forever living environment of multiple disciplines, reviews with a coordination meeting, and outputs at various milestones. Another example, this is a level 2 that I built once for, so the reason here was we were looking at the Penn State and we said, well, you know what? The process is going to be similar for a lot of the uses. So the project manager said to me, this is too complicated, give me something simpler. I said, oh, okay, let me try. So what we did here was, I said, all right, again, I'm gonna have a lot of information coming in from my level 1. I'm gonna have BIM plans, etc., coming in. We're gonna have a team, we're gonna kick off. I'm going to have this collection of models, and we're going to use Navisworks as a clash review tool or as an assembly. And we said everything's going to converge through Navisworks, and from there we're going to do a couple of BIM uses. You can see here I have a bunch of items coming off, a record model, clash reports that then come and feed back the mitigation cycle and then back into modeling. So there's always this continual loop. And I want to stop here for a moment. This loop here that I'm circling with my mouse. This, all for the most part, happens outside of your BIM authoring. And that's why I like here we have the modeling in a box, a review in a box, and a lot of stuff happening here. That digital information, the communication network, the decisions, the influences of project managers, discipline leads, clients, external stakeholders, permitting agencies, existing utilities companies. There's a lot of people out there that will take something output from your BIM, comment on it, and there has to be a resolution. And that's why I'm excited you guys be exposed to tools like BIMTrack, because that's what it's about, tracking those commenting. If you've been on a project where you've had a tool like Aconex or Autodesk's BIM 360, I can name a bunch. A lot of those are focusing on mitigating the conversation, tracking the decisions, tracking the solutions, and building a feedback loop back to us BIM coordinators to further enhance that single source of truth. Fun stuff. Back to here. Start with this, end with this. This is by far the most critical thing to understand. Owner's requirements, assessing the team, building an initial plan, continually updating the plan as we go forward. That is, if there is any takeaway from this week and this week's assignment, it's whatever you put down is about achieving this, because without this, the risk on the project, the quality, the ability to deliver, the ability to meet the deliverable requirements are all gone. This is everything. And that's my message for this week. Now, just being mindful of time, I just want to see, okay, very, very quickly on this, very quickly. So talking about this here, we're often faced with, oh, the burden of the BIM lead, the burden of the role that's brand new, blah, blah, blah. And I get in there and I just say, no, it's not. We've been doing this stuff for decades. Now, I think in week one, I said BIM was coined about, 10, 12 years ago. But the concept of managing some type of information, whether it was in a 2D CAD database, that's what AutoCAD was, or other forms where there was 3D modeling, but not called BIM, whatever. There was always some person people went to for accountability. That's what this role's about. We want to get it right from the beginning, and that's the whole point of BIM execution planning. It's not about guessing. So when we're in the RFP or the request for proposal stages, we want to get in front, get with those project managers, get in there and ask questions, because the biggest break, and actually that's this line item, this second bullet. So this is an IBI slide, but this is an important one. The biggest break we have with BIM implementation is we're often reacting to what was promised to. If we're able to get in there at the proposal level, so the client says, I want to build a transit system from point A to point B. Here are my particulars. You read the particulars. There might be an off-the-mark comment about BIM or CAD or Revit or Bentley or blah, blah, blah. Maybe there's a BIM myth riddled into an RFP. You get in there, you ask the question, it becomes public information because they have to reply by bidding laws and within jurisdiction. A lot of good stuff there, and you get your answer. And then once you have that answer, there's clarity or more clarity. Therefore, we can build the project around something that's true. Oftentimes attacking that BIM myth of, oh my God, you do BIM, there's so much you have to do, rubbish. You could do BIM in its utter simplicity, and that's design, authoring, design review, and visualization. As an architect, that's what I do in my head. That's what we do when we do simple projects where you're just designing. You're doing those three things, so let's harness BIM and do it better. Then get complex. You could do any one of these other things. If we do these other things, how are we going to do it? What's the point? So what's the goals we're trying to achieve by using these BIM uses? How are we going to use them? Gets into the process maps. And then, do we need software outputs? Do they meet deliverables, etc.? That's the process we go through. And then you budget it accordingly. And then that budget item, expect a heavier effort earlier and then a continual effort. I talk about a lot of BIM myths because I've seen too many of them. Oh, Brent, we just need you here at the beginning to set us up and away we go. No, that's a myth. That's not true. But you do need me there at the beginning to set you up. But then you need a continual maintenance review, collaborative effort to ensure stuff is happening properly throughout the duration of the project. And that's built into the execution plan as well. So with that, that's the portion I wanted to talk through today. Everybody can comment if you can. I'll make sure nobody's muted by the organizer. So right now, everybody is self-muted. So are there any questions or comments that anybody wanted to raise at this moment? Have I rendered you all speechless? Somebody must comment, or I'm gonna pick on somebody. Somebody comment. At least let me know you could still hear me.
I can.
Woohoo! All right, there you go.
I've been paying attention, but yeah, so it was a lot of information, but it was very well explained, and yeah, I liked it.
Okay, cool. So I know, yeah, this is it with the presentation. What I wanted to do is touch on the assignment, because so let me do this. I am going to switch my Blackboard to student view. So this is what you guys should see. So right now we just completed week 3, or the week 3 live session. What I asked you guys to do on the virtual, and you got to please catch up with the online portion of the week, because I don't want, like, I do track as you guys are adding to the discussion board. It is very valuable. I've noticed you guys are catching up at week 1 and 2. It's important because it also audits the participation. You must catch up here. I think the beauty, though, is you can kind of couple this week's hybrid or online along with the start of the assignment, because they kind of work hand in hand, which is good. What I asked you guys to do is have a look at the BIM execution plan. And then I was asking for 3 differences. Okay, so plug into here and awesome. So we have a couple of differences posted already. And it's really the start, kind of enhancing on what I talked about, but it's the start of what's going to be in this assignment. So do get in here, enter some 3 differences. You know, the ones that are here are spot on. Have a look at this assignment, because this is open now. And really it's a full-on compare contrast. So what I want you guys to do is take the full plans, and I did provide the links, but just earlier I said, you know what, I'm going to drop a zip file. So I think the Penn State, if I can't remember, but you have to give your email and then you get to download. And I think it was pretty straightforward, but I can't remember. So I said, make it a lot easier for you guys. Here's everything. And what I have in that zip is basically this US folder. Focus here on the BIM template and guidelines, and here's everything. And the beauty of this, you get your overview documents, and then there's the guide. The guide is a great document, and then basically all the templates, the process maps, everything I showed in the presentation, it's all here, various formats. Their idea was you can use Word, PowerPoint, Visio, whatever works. But, you know, these top 2 or top 3 are the ones that you would be focusing on. And then I added in the UK into that zip file. So critical there would be the pre and post plan, as well as the assessment forms that are there. So have a look. What I'm hoping here is, you know, I'm not prescribing the format by any means. I want you guys to be able to just look, assemble in a logical way, comparing and contrasting. So things that are similar, things that are different. Now, imagine me as your PM. I am a BIM illiterate PM, or maybe a BIM aware. I know BIM exists. I know we need an execution plan. Okay, you're my BIM coordinator. I don't know what you're supposed to have on this plan. I've gone to a couple seminars, conferences. They've told me about these things. I've said to you, just like this, here are these 2 things. One's from the UK, one's from North America. I don't know. You tell me. And you're going to come back to me as my BIM coordinator and say, well, here's the differences. And that'll help to enlighten you, and that's the compare and contrast, on how globally we are similar, and globally we've also made things complex. But it's all good. And what we've done at IBI, so I gave you the industry template. At IBI, we've, you know, the decision we've made, right or wrong, was to say, all right, take what they're doing in the UK, take what we're doing in North America, make an IBI generic template, and try to make sure that if something's missing in one, we add it from the other. And that was an interesting exercise, because some of my North American BIM coordinators said, I don't know what this is. And I've said, yeah, it's a UK item. Let's talk about it. Or the capability assessment forms. We don't know what to do. I say, no, you don't, because it's from the UK. So there's some good things, and vice versa. The UK, what's an LOD matrix? So go through that. We have a couple weeks to fill this out. So I think I'll put the deadline for all of the assignments. What I've said is from the week where they're exposed, 2 Wednesdays after. So I think I'll put the deadline as October 4th. So it doesn't get, so it gets done before the next assignment opens. And then the next week, I think we'll have somewhere there's another quiz here. I think it was week 4 or 5. And again, it's just those 10 marks, 10 question quiz. So I don't want you guys to be convoluted on, oh my God, there's a quiz coming, or I have now 2 assignments in parallel. So, jump at it. And I know there's this class in and amongst the other classes, but I think there's going to be some synergy here because I know the BIM execution plan is coming up in, I think the 1050 class, if it hasn't already, and in the 1010 class as well, with Susan's and Rachel. So do what you can. Any questions? It's, hey, Brent, what are you talking about? If you enter it here, I think it allows, so it allows you to see the grading rubric as well. I didn't put the points on, but what I've done is in any of the assignments, I've taken this approach. So just your overall presentation, your ability to analyze, and just an overall summary, high-level summary. And you can see, from a excellent to proficient, it scales down a little bit to, to be in this realm. You can see here, unsatisfactory, little or no attempt. So, that I'm going to try to make it not as non-subjective as possible. So really, it'll be what you put to the table, and just for me, it'll be if you put the effort, it'll be evident. And I think that'll resonate through all of the assignments. So any questions or comments on the assignment 3?
I have a question.
Yep, go ahead.
Okay. So are we comparing both of them like we did for this week's online part, but in depth, or what are we looking for? Like comparing styles, comparing.
So that's so the answer is yes, and much more, right? So That's why So this week's online, it was kind of like the teaser. So my thinking process was, before now, you either have never seen the plan, or one of the other classes might have said, hey, there's a plan. So the online was pop it open. Why is Brent making me look at these 2 things? Can I find something? The focus I would like to be on probably highlighting that work on these. So especially, and sometimes terminology is that an easy one, but it's amazing. And just the employer as an example, the confusion that term has caused in the BIM world because of what an employer means in the United States or in North America versus the United Kingdom. But I think those main subject headings will be enough for you to hit some back and forth. And you may come back and say they both cover them in a similar manner. One covers them, one doesn't. One alludes to it, one doesn't. One has in-depth, one just alludes to, you know what I mean? So there could be some interesting back and forths that you have with them. And I would just, that's the thing is, if you touch on those items and you're able to present, this is what you're able to ascertain from the 2 plans, you got it. That's what we want.
Okay.
Cool.
Thank you.
No problemo. Okay, so that's, so October 4th. So that was the due date I put on it. Again, as I said, any issues, the easiest is to email or, email most likely, and I will be very responsive to that. And then I guess we'll finish a little early, which is great. Just looking into week 4, I will be opening up week 4 shortly. Again, like pressing on the hybrid portions would really help the latter half of these of the classes be more interactive, because that's what I really want to jump on to get everyone to engage. But this week specifically, I thought we would be a little overburdened, so it's kind of, this week's hybrid online was a teaser for the assignment. Next week, we're going to be getting into software. So what I would like to do, and I'm tempted to actually start, so depending on the online responses, I would love to start with getting your insights on software prior to jumping into the overview presentation. But I'll see. And you can see a lot of these, I want to start having the more live discussions, but so I need those with any microphone issues, just maybe phone in or whatever you need to do. But if we could get fully caught up on the hybrid portion, that would be great. And this one here would be just from your knowledge, right? So don't listen to my YouTube, don't go into the PowerPoint. We're going to cover it, obviously, right? But it would be awesome to know, just from your knowledge of software as it stands today, what can you make a matrix saying, for building software versus civil versus plant, collaboration, analysis, PM or other, these are the tools I know or I've seen or whatnot. And it would be awesome to be able to have a quick look at those prior to the dialogue. So we'll see how that fits out. But I will make this live. Actually, I'll make this available now. And then just like with all the others, I will process the video, post it, and yeah, and then we're ready to rock. So with that, that's all I have for today. If there's any closing questions or comments, I'll see if anything's posted here. Oops, hold on, let me see. Sorry, this question pane is buried here. Okay. Okay, if there isn't anything else, please next time let's get these audios working. And I want to hear more of your voices. I really do next time. So we're going to, that's why, again, I want to start with the hybrid first. But okay, thank you everybody. Have fun at your next class, and have a great weekend and week.
Thank you so much. Have a great one as well.
All right, you too. Take it easy, everybody.
Thank you.